Hello and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast. I'm joined by Skye, as always, and a very special guest this evening. I'm joined by the NFL Network's Adam Rank, also the host of the Sick Podcast, the sickest Bears podcast on YouTube at the moment. So if you're a big Bears fan and you haven't seen it, go and watch it. There's loads of entertaining stuff on there. And probably most well known for his NFL Fantasy Live stuff. Adam, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate the warm introduction, especially when you put over my podcast. That's very nice of you. A lot of people won't do it. They want to be like, oh, the highbrow. Like, this is NFL Network. Like, you can't mention my humble little podcast. And honestly, it's only for Bears fans, because although we do have Lions fans pop in from time to time just to talk. Well, now the Lions fans are all over the place. They can't wait for this season to start. But it's great to be here. I guess it was this is why before we started, both these gentlemen were like, hey, how long do we got you for? I'm like, you better catalog about an hour, because you will ask the most innocuous question. And then 20 minutes later, you're like, is this guy still talking? Like, what is happening?
Makes my job easy. If I'm just going to ask one question and you're going to that's fine.
Right. 4 questions and I've got the rest. It's okay.
Yeah, you say that the Sick Podcast is only for Bears fans. You know, I'm not a Bears fan, and I've watched a fair few episodes. Maybe because I have a massive love for Justin Fields, and I want to know what everyone wants to talk about him. So, I just love that guy. But as we're on that topic, and we've mentioned the Bears already, let's jump straight into the Bears and give you your chance to chat about them. How are you looking forward to the upcoming season with the Bears?
Well, here's the thing, Andrew, is I love the Bears and I'm always optimistic. And you might or might not know this. I'm also a Angels fan in Major League Baseball. And both teams always seem to underperform. Oh, you can also see the Arsenal. The Arsenal. By the way, I'm American, so I do say the Arsenal. I always am super optimistic. And then when I was talking about the Bears earlier this year, it'll be late February, maybe early March, I said, you know what? My luck's changing because Arsenal's going to win the Premier League. And my friend, who also is a Gooner, is like, why would you even say such a thing? I'm like, there's no way. Excuse me. There's no way we could lose this. And we know where we're sitting now. So all my enthusiasm with the Bears, it needs to be tempered a little bit. Excuse me. Oh, the day I didn't bring water with me. But in any event, I'm very excited about the Bears. I think that, the one great thing about the NFL is that there is always a lot of turnover, especially at the top. Teams at the top don't stay there forever. The NFL structure is built to allow teams to go out there and be competitive. There's a Leicester City every season for the NFL. That's just the way that they've designed it. That's the way that they want the league. And that's what's happening. And so when everybody looks at the Bears and scoffs at the idea that they could be a 10-win team, a 12-win team, I know I was overly optimistic in my predictions that you can see on TikTok and Twitter and all that stuff. I really do believe that there's a lot of talent on this club, and it starts with Justin Fields, a player who I loved at Ohio State. You can go back. I have receipts. I was praying that Justin Fields was going to be our quarterback. I didn't think it was realistic because at the time the Bears were drafting 20th in that draft, and understandably knowing that Trevor Lawrence was going to go number 1 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Justin Fields to me was the second best choice in that draft. And by some miracle, the Jets wanted to go with Zach Wilson. The 49ers took Trey Lance, and then a bunch of teams started skipping him. And it was so surreal watching that draft because I remember it distinctly. Like after Carolina and Denver passed, even Detroit, I thought possibly could be in the mix. I'm like, oh wow, there's something that can happen. And when the Bears made that trade with the New York Giants to move up there, you're like, it's happening. And then my friend at the last second is like, what if it's Mac Jones? I'm like, I will walk into the Pacific Ocean right now if it's Mac Jones. Not that Mac Jones is terrible, but I was so infatuated with Justin Fields. And so I think that this season, with the improvements that they made on the offensive line, in addition to Darnell Wright, who is going to be the rookie starting at right tackle, Nate Davis was a very good right guard for the Tennessee Titans. You bring in DJ Moore, that ex-receiver, that difference maker. We were talking about it on a show this week about there were a handful of wide receivers that you would be like, okay, that guy's better. Like Justin Jefferson's the best wide receiver in the game. Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. And then it gets very like who's better? Like CeeDee Lamb is very good. I'm not going to say that he's better than DJ Moore. You got AJ Brown. I'm not going to say he's better than DJ Moore. I don't think Stephon Diggs is necessarily better. You can make an argument for it, but it's not cut and dry. Even Cooper Kupp, who I think is very good. I'm like, I don't know. So I feel very optimistic. And I think at this point of our lives in June, this is when optimism should reign supreme. Like, why? I know that people love to go online and be like, I don't want to get, like, why don't you want to get your hopes up? We only get so many revolutions around the sun. Why don't you go out there with a positive attitude? Maybe this is the year. It's okay. I mean, I guess a pessimist can never be pleasantly surprised. I would prefer to take the optimistic view. I think this Bears team could be very good.
You've given me some PTSD there, Adam, because I'm going to confess that I'm a Patriots fan and I wanted Justin Fields.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, I'm not going to throw any Mac Jones slander either. But, yeah, Fields is, he's a great guy. You can see the talent from day one.
It's nothing against Mac Jones either. And one of my friends, Draft Dr. Phil, who does a Bears podcast, Keeping It 100, he loved Mac Jones. And I was like, at 20, you thought like maybe Mac Jones could be the guy because, and I don't want to, Andrew, I don't want to ruin your life, but I think that the Patriots would have taken him if he was there, especially because they had Cam Newton on the roster at that point, if I'm not mistaken. And Justin Fields would have been perfect behind Cam Newton to start the year before they eventually would have moved on. I really do feel like Mac Jones can still be a good quarterback. I think it's way too early to write him off. Even when I was doing the Patriots predictions this year, I even looked back on it. I'm like, I don't think I'm giving the Patriots enough credit. I think the defense is going to be really good. Ramondre Stevenson is a great running back. And I think Mac Jones can develop. And now that they got Bill O'Brien back, oh man, I think I underestimated New England. Like again, when I look back in December, I'll be like, why did I disregard New England so much? I think we'll see a different Mac Jones this year.
Yeah, I think we definitely will. Now you said to go and view your predictions on the Bears.
Wait, hold on, Andrew. Who was it? Skye? I wasn't looking.
Yeah, I'm not a Patriots fan.
The British accents blend together. Obviously, we probably all sound the same.
I don't want to say that, but it's very comforting because I've just been catching up with Ted Lasso. So to hear the British accents, it really I'm immersed in it right now. So it's very comforting. So I'm sorry. Skye's the Patriots fan.
Yes.
Andrew, who's your team?
Giants.
So okay.
The trade worked well for us.
Listen, I will say this too. You got some nice pieces. I think that Thibodeau, I know that you didn't use that Bears pick on Thibodeau, but it did give you some room to operate. Neal could end up developing into a pretty good tackle. I think it's so ridiculous when people give up like, oh my God, he's like, it's been one season. Let him go out there and do his thing. I think that when you look at Daniel Jones right now, this is like the first time that he has some pretty decent weapons. And I think that if Darren Waller can go out there, and by the way, who was it? What is it? Bellinger. Holy Lord. Bellinger looks like Jinder Mahal. Remember when Jinder Mahal returned to the WWE and you're like, who is this guy? That's exactly what happened to Danny Bellinger. You're like, whoa, he's like a little Lattimore from the program. I like what the Giants are doing. I think that Brian Daboll has got a handle on the situation. I think Saquon Barkley played great. I like what the Giants got going on.
Yeah, I'm going to stay optimistic. Obviously, I hate to say this, but the Eagles obviously still look very talented, only added more weapons and more on that defense and things like that. You know, Howie's doing some great things over there. But I'm going to stay optimistic like you are with the Bears. And as you said, you've got your Bears on your predictions at 12-5. We put it into the group, in our little group chat that we've got. A lot of people going like, nah, surely not. But I had a look through it, and I can see them easily winning 10. So
that's the biggest.
You've got a very good schedule.
That is the thing. It's point to the losses to me, and I think week 3, Kansas City. Okay, fair enough. Mm-hmm. The Bears are not on the same level as Kansas City, but there's a lot of games that I think you would call 50-50 games. The LA Chargers, the Saints, who I gave them losses to. But even then, you're like, they could win those games. Atlanta, Carolina. There's a lot of opportunity for them to win games. The Commanders last year, that game against the Commanders came down to the wire. Darnell Mooney was not able to convert at the very end there. And my guy, Velus Jones Jr., he's still my guy. I still love him, but he made a mistake in that game that allowed the Commanders to score their only touchdown. The Commanders were 1-4 going into that game as well. So I'm like, I don't think that's a very good team. So there's a lot of these games where you're like, why? Like the Bears are going to be very competitive. It's the Lions fans and the Vikings fans who just, and I gave them splits. I'm like, oh, they'll split these games. And those fan bases are like, you're not beating us. I'm like, shut up. Like for the first time in forever, you guys were good. And now you think that you're this invincible team. Like, stop it. So I think that a lot of people, when you tell them double-digit wins, a lot like you will do in the group chat, you'll be like, that's impossible. Then you look at it and you're like, I kind of see it. Like it could happen. Not that people are going to predict it, but it could happen. And I think that if I could get people to a place where they think it could happen, then I've done my job.
Definitely. Now we move slightly away from the Bears into what my favorite thing. I was going to try your tagline on your Instagram to put it out there, but it's a right mouthful of saying your favorite fantasy analyst's favorite fantasy analyst.
Yes.
But we're going to move into a bit of fantasy football, I think, and we're going to chat about that. I'm going to segue it into slightly. I've got one question. I'll leave that till later, actually, the question that I've got for you, because it's about the running back that you acquired that I'm a big fan of. But you're obviously really famous for the work that you do in fantasy football. What is it about fantasy football that you find brings everybody together? In a way, it's almost what is the segue of getting fans involved in it. I know a lot of my friends didn't really watch it, started playing fantasy. Now they're massive fans. What is it about fantasy football that brings people together?
Well, if you root for a team that is not very good or has gone through some stretches where they're not good, and I think Skye is just starting to appreciate this now because for the previous 2 decades, his team was always good. He's like, why are you clowns playing fantasy? I love real football. And then your team sucks and you need something to do in October. You guys have October out there, right? No, I'm kidding. You need something to do and something to watch. Well, okay, I'll play fantasy football, and it's something that will continue to keep my interest moving forward. And I think for a lot of people, it starts off as something that you do with your closest friends. And as everybody gets older and gets married and they have children and you spend less and less time with your friends and more time with your family, well, the little chunk of time you can carve out is your fantasy. You do a fantasy draft, everybody gets together, go to somebody's house, go to a pub, whatever it is. Maybe it's a destination, you go to Las Vegas, whatever it is. And then you get that weekend in August, you get together, you see everybody. It's like a little mini reunion. And then we've all got phones. So you text, there's the text chain. Everybody's got a text chain. It's probably dormant right now, but it'll start activating here in probably a couple of weeks about like, hey, when are we doing the draft? Where are we going? Who's having it? And that's the one thing that keeps people invested, is that you're doing something with your best friends. And this keeps you in communication. This keeps you together. You can keep track of everybody. It's better than any sort of social media or anything like that. And it's just a great way to continue to bond and chat with your friends. And so even, when I started my league of record 20 years ago, I mean, we're still on the same platform. We still play on Yahoo. A lot of the team names are the same. Like, it's crazy. And so that's the biggest draw. And even as gambling in the United States, especially, becomes more accepted, more prevalent, your home league, that one league with your best friends, is always going to remain there for you. And it's something that everybody looks forward to every season. And that's the big draw. And that's the coolest thing about, on an NFL Sunday, last year, the Bears played a lot of the early slate games, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And then in the afternoon, you got your fantasy guys to watch. I had Patrick Mahomes on a lot of my teams, so I was always watching Chief games and doing things like that. And that's one of the cool things. Like, I can root for Patrick Mahomes without being a front runner because he's on my fantasy team. So it doesn't look cheap. Normally, like if you start cheering for guys who are not a part of your team, like, oh, front runner, you're like, oh, fantasy team. And then it's like, okay, that's acceptable. That's socially acceptable. Everybody can understand that. And that's the great part about it. And, I was very fortunate to get in on the ground floor, years ago, talking about fantasy, trying to help bring it to the mainstream. Now, obviously, Matthew Berry was the number one guy. He was the GOAT. And then a couple of us kind of followed in his footsteps. And now you see the way that it is. There's so much content to consume, so many providers and everything. And it's exciting. And it's a lot of fun to be a part of. And it's something that brings us all together. So I think that's the beauty of sport, and we found a way to make a sport within a sport. And it's been a lot of fun.
I know me and Andrew are both obsessed with fantasy football. And I think, as you mentioned, Adam, I hadn't played Dynasty until about 3 years ago, which coincidentally is since the Patriots have dropped off. So now I spend my summers a lot more invested as well because of Dynasty. I guess that's a good segue into the rookies for, Dynasty drafts out there at the moment. Is there any rookies that are sort of outside of the obvious standouts, in terms of that wide receiver class? Are there anyone else who you think are sort of sleepers to keep for the long run? Because, for example, I saw your tweet earlier about Ty Chandler, because we heard the Dalvin Cook news earlier today. I have McBride in 2 of my Dynasty leagues. He's on my taxi squad. I'm glad you didn't throw his name out there, because I'm sure everyone would have rushed to check their waivers and free agents.
Yeah, I throw you guys a bone every once in a while. I don't want to. I like to play for more the casual audience, so I will let the deep dive. Because for Dynasty, Ty Chandler is actually older than Alexander Madison, which is crazy. So I don't think that he's a great value in Dynasty, but like you said, you know where it's at. I'll keep that one between us.
Okay, that's a secret. Any other deep dives, secret ones? And I'm pushing you now.
No. Listen, hold on. Listen. Let me start going through my list. I'm pulling up some materials. I'm actually going to pull up Fantasy Pros because obviously everybody knows Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jackson Smith, and Jigma. I think that once you get down, I know people love Zach Charbonnet, but I'm like, we'll see. The
It's
one
that
guy,
shared backfield, it's too much.
yes, I really like. Well, obviously, I'm going to come off like a homer when I say Rashawn Johnson. Well, let's be realistic for a second. He's going to a backfield with Deontay Foreman, who's really good. They got Khalil Herbert there. But Rashawn Johnson has that kind of ability to end up being one of those like number one running backs because he can do it all. Nobody really, and I will say that traditional casual fantasy football fans who kind of follow college football, but not really. Like everybody knows Bijan Robinson. They don't understand that he was his backup and that the only reason that we didn't know about him was because of his situation. Had he transferred to Arizona State or Oregon or someplace like that, he would have ended up being a number one running back. He might have even been talked about in the same circles as Bijan Robinson, is an all-around back who can do everything. He's a former quarterback who, was converted to a running back. I know you can make your Justin Fields jokes there, but I think that he's got a lot of ability. And because the fact that he didn't transfer out of Texas shows me that he's a good locker room guy as well. So I'm very excited about him. I actually was in a dynasty draft where I had 1.01 and I took Robinson, and this is a 2 quarterback league. And I thought that I had set, because I had to auto pick it because they did it during my sick podcast on a Tuesday night, which was upsetting. I'm like, I'm the only one working right now. I've got it, whatever. I thought I had set it up and I got Josh Downs instead of Rashawn Johnson. So I tried to, I'm like, hey, I go, can I trade you? And the guy goes, oh, I'm going to need a lot more than Josh. I'm like, Josh Downs went before him. Like, it's not like, I'm like, whatever. And so I had to miss out on that one. But I love him. And since, I'm going to be coming off as extremely biased, Tyler Scott is another guy. Like Tyler Scott, of all those wide receivers that got drafted after the first round, and I'm not talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison, or anything like that. Even John Mingo's good, but all the Rashee Rices, the Tank Dells, the guy that the Packers got, the fourth rounder that the Packers got in the second round. Tyler Scott is better than all of them. And it's a travesty that it's amazing that he felt it. I felt bad for him. I talked to him on my podcast. He was the guy that the Packers should have picked. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait till he's better than that Packers receiver. That is going to be one. Like, this is where I think the tide is starting to change. It's like, we have the better quarterback now. We're starting to make the better draft picks. I'm like, this is a great way to live. And they took Van Ness. Like, oh my God. Draft night. The only thing, and you can go back and check, because I was on my friend's podcast. I'm like, if we take Van Ness, I am going to stop rooting for this team, because like, that guy didn't even start for Iowa. Like, he's a one-dimensional player. Like, the Bears are not in a position to be taking one-dimensional players. The Eagles can draft him. That's fine. And then the Packers drafted him. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is great. But I love those two guys. And of course, I'm going to be coming off very biased. I will tell you this, though. I love Jalen Hyatt. I thought that was a really good pick by the New York Giants. I think that he has the ability with because like Darren Waller is going to be, actually, I would think Saquon's your number one pass catcher. Darren Waller's there. Jalen Hyatt has an opportunity, because those two guys are so good and they command so much of the field, that Jalen Hyatt can actually come in and make a little bit of an impact for you. Might end up being the best wide receiver in that room. I think that they've got some nice pieces there, but I really like Jalen Hyatt. I thought that was a really good pick. And again, I would have put him ahead of guys like Rashee Rice and Tank Dell and those guys. Even Josh Downs. Josh Downs is okay. I like Josh Downs, but the one of the reasons I don't like having him is I think that my guy AR5, Anthony Richardson, is going to run a lot, and he's going to take a lot, especially in the first couple of years as he's getting better as a passer. He's going to run a lot. We're going to see a lot of what we saw at Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields last year. Like, we're going to see a lot of that before he eventually develops as a passer, but I think he'll be pretty good. I think Luke Schoonmaker is an interesting name for the Dallas Cowboys. I think that both their rookies last year, was it Dalton Kincaid and the other guy, they were both fine, but I think Schoonmaker could end up being a really good option, especially if the Cowboys don't end up with a number 2 wide receiver that's better than, who was it? Not Galloway, but what's his name? Oh, Gallup.
Yes. Brandon Cooks. I think that's a good signing for them, though.
Oh yeah, they got Brandon Cooks. I still like Schoonmaker, though. That's an interesting one.
You think he'll beat out Jake Ferguson, because he's the Wisconsin
Ferguson?
Tight end,
That's
right? Yeah, got two
Fergie
tight ends here, 2 young tight ends.
So it's Dalton Kincaid and Fergie. Fergie was okay, but I think Schoonmaker, there's a reason why they drafted him.
Yeah,
and I think he's somebody that I would be keeping a look at as I get deeper into this one. Want to make sure I don't forget anybody. Oh yeah. Zach Kuntz for the Kuntz for the New York Jets. Interesting. But I think who is the Rams guy? The Rams the BYU kid. Puka Nakua. Puka Nakua is interesting just because the volume of the offense. Like, who is the number 2 wide receiver for the Rams? I know they're going to give they got Van Jefferson. They got the other white guy, number 18. Skoronski, who was their most targeted guy. It's so insane to me that last year Cooper Kupp missed the last 7 games. He was still second on the team in targets. Nobody stepped up. So Puka Nakua, who normally you don't want to rely on these rookies, but you're like, I'm taking a chance. Again, a little bit of a deeper pick. I think that's a pretty good one. So there's some guys outside of the obvious, of course. So I don't want, by the way, if I find a comment of one guy being like, he's not even talking about Jahmyr Gibbs, you know about Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't need to sit here and lecture you on Jahmyr Gibbs. He's a fine player. And by the way, I will say this. When he was drafted by the Lions, I questioned what they were doing. But now that you kind of see the whole thing play out, they got rid of DeAndre Swift. You're like, that's not a terrible move. I have to go back in retrospect and be like, all right. I mean, are you overdrafting for your, over in drafting a position? I can't even describe the way. What's the English word I'm thinking of? No. I normally you wouldn't take a running back 12 overall, but I think where the Lions, where they are, I'm like, okay, I'm cool with it because, they had extra draft capital because they traded down, they picked up extra picks. Like they're fine. Like take a luxury pick. This one didn't cost you anything. You got it from the Rams for free, basically. So I kind of like that pick and I think he's going to be pretty good. So again, you didn't need to hear that from me, but just so you know, the obvious guys are the obvious guys.
Everyone was annoyed that they took running back, linebacker, weren't they? Because obviously they're classed as overvalued picks for round one. But if they pick up an edge rusher before the season starts, there's still a couple of guys knocking about in free agency. So they could be fine, and it could all make sense. That they might have a good thing going. You'd say the Roschon Johnson one. That's the one that in our group, that's the name that was flying around that we all said after the draft. That's the only running back of the whole draft class that fell to a team that he could make an impact in. We felt all the others going to be in committee backs, going to struggle to get the RB1 spot. But Roschon Johnson was the one for us that we were like, yeah, this is the guy. And no one was really talking about him. So that was the name that I was alluding to before we segued into fantasy. But you briefly spoke there that you were in a 2-quarterback league. What's your favorite type of format for fantasy?
With the dynasty leagues or even, general leagues, I've really started to lean towards the 2-quarterback or super flex leagues. Yeah. Super flex is probably the better way to go. So you can put a position player in there. I really like it because it values the quarterback position because I hate what you would call standard fantasy where quarterbacks are a dime a dozen, wait on a quarterback. Like it kind of takes away the essence of what football is all about because it's very difficult to win in the NFL without a good quarterback. And when you win fantasy leagues by streaming quarterbacks, there's a bit of skill to it. And I think for the sharps, there's some sort of prestige of like, I'm always finding that edge. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But I think for people who want to play casually with your friends, you're not going to spend 40 hours a week on your fantasy team. It's better off to have, it to be more enjoyable. And I want to have the quarterback matter. Now in my league of record, and another league, which I will call my second city league, even though they're not 2-quarterback leagues, the scoring of the leagues are so weighted towards quarterback. You still have to draft a guy in the early going. And that, by the way, that's a little tip too, is like know your league scoring settings before and beyond is it half point PPR? Is it PPR? But like, even like the nuances of like, are there bonuses? Because I've noticed in my second city league, the people haven't really caught on yet. I'm like, God, this is so weighted to the quarterbacks. Like there's so many bonuses for passing yards. Passing touchdowns are worth 6. Passing touchdowns are worth 6. Interceptions are -1. Like you got to have these good quarterbacks. And so I say, number one, study your scoring, look accordingly, look to the previous season, see who the top scorers were, draft to those values. I do like 2-quarterback leagues. I think it's kind of fun. I think super flex is pretty fun. And I know that people will do that. I draft a mainstream, like high-end quarterback, and then I go out and I filter it in and I try to find, not to knock on Daniel Jones, but like Daniel Jones, who gives you, no, I mean that because he gives you the rushing floor. So he's a very safe quarterback. And so I do kind of like the nuance of that, especially in dynasty leagues, because I have Hendon Hooker. And so I was trying to like deal with the guy who has Jared Goff. I'm like, I'll tell you what, the Lions are going to end up losing like 4 of their first 5 games. They're going to panic. They're going to go to Hendon Hooker eventually. You might as well save yourself a little bit of trouble and get them now instead of like scrambling to me in week 5. I'm going to have the Lions starting quarterback. And that sales pitch did not work. So I'm still holding on to him. But I still believe it's apt. If you look at the Lions schedule, like they've got some tough games in the early going, especially with that Kansas City Chiefs game. But that's the one cool thing about, especially in Dynasty, is the 2-quarterback leagues make it a lot of fun.
I thought Skye was going to jump in with a
Oh,
question. You're
go,
good,
you
mate.
go.
Just admiring the background.
Why does Skye not? Do you guys not like 2 quarterback leagues?
No,
What's
no.
the deal?
I was saying to Andrew earlier. I hate standard leagues like with two. If now I think we're playing fantasy for over 10 years now. Can't be dealing with it if it's 2 receivers. I like either 3 receivers, or I've only started playing the Superflex in the last couple of years. I think I have Geno Smith and Russell Wilson in mind, so I might need to. But I mean, Geno Smith this year, arguably you could say Seattle's 3 receivers, the top 5 in terms of receiving core. So I think I was being laughed at last year for having Smith. I'm trying to get rid of Purdy by convincing people that eventually, a coordinator or someone for the Niners is going to end up on another team, and they'll go and get Purdy if Lance wins the job. But no, I really like. I think I'm starting to buy into the 2 quarterbacks now. But I like the 3 receiver ones because I think a lot of my friends are the people that Andrew touched upon in the sense that they don't really follow a team. They only follow fantasies. I kind of manipulate the draft a bit. Like 2 years ago, I had Chase, Debo, and Cooper Kupp in 2 leagues, and that was a walkthrough. But obviously now everyone knows those guys, so you have to then think ahead of who's going to be the next one to sort of break out and take advantage. But yeah, I think anything different compared to the normal standard is great because it just adds a bit of a different dynamic.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll move on to redraft as the next topic, and there's been a lot of debate on our fantasy show last year, and we're going to move into it this year when we're going to talk about it. It's strategy when it comes to redraft, where in the previous years, everyone's gone running back with the first 2 picks because there's not many of them out there, and they're super valuable if you can get one of the high-end ones. But this year, that didn't work, and I'm looking at next year. The wide receivers, for me, if you can get the big names, I think they're worth more now than the running backs, and all the running backs seem to be worth the same, even if they're not the big names. How do you feel about strategy for redraft, and are you sticking to the same thing, or are you thinking there's a new wave now?
No, I agree with you. And unless you get Christian McCaffrey, which I believe would necessitate you being one of the first 2 picks in the draft, I really don't want to buy in on one of the running backs. I know Saquon Barkley was very good last year. There's an opportunity for him to repeat again. I don't like to throw around terms like injury prone or anything like that, but I do think that there's opportunity for regression for Saquon Barkley, for Austin Eckler, especially when you look at Austin Eckler. A lot of his production came when there were injuries to Keenan Allen and or Mike Williams. Now, when you bring in Quentin Johnston and you have 3 wide receivers, and if those 3 guys can continue to make an impact and you start to chip away at Austin Eckler's receiving value, well, that makes him less valuable as a running back. You also have a risk. Alvin Kamara is going to be probably facing a suspension at some point. But Bijan Robinson ends up being like one of the first 3 running backs off the board. Aaron Jones is a question mark because we don't know how Jordan Love is going to respond this year. And even guys like last year, I was really excited about Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones. And when you look at the end of the season, you're like, oh, this was the RB5, this was the RB6, depending on your scoring settings. The week to week of it was not great. Like, I don't remember being like, oh, thank God, like this is my guy that I can count on every week. That was Christian McCaffrey, especially when he got traded to the 49ers, because starting in week 8, he was the only player who had over 1,000 scrimmage yards and 10 total touchdowns from weeks 8 to 18. So again, I would rather go with the wide receivers. I know that a lot of guys have started to play hero RB, which is like, we're going to go 1 running back and then we're going all receivers. And I would rather jump the gun on that and rather just go 2 receivers, especially if you're later in the first round. Now, I made a tweet a couple of days ago about, like, in my leagues with friends of mine, not sharps, not with Field Yates or Mike Golick Jr. or anybody like that. Like, my friends, for whatever reason, and I think it's an anti-Cowboys bias, they don't value CeeDee Lamb as much as sharps do. And it's funny to me. And I'm like, second round, and like CeeDee Lamb is there, and you're like, what is happening? Like, of course, give me CeeDee Lamb. So if I started a draft with Cooper Kupp and CeeDee Lamb, or Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, or Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb, I love that. So I would rather go wide receiver. Consider Travis Kelce at some point as well, because he is so far and ahead of the other tight ends, especially in leagues where tight ends get 8 points for a touchdown reception. But I think it's better to go with the wide receivers and be like, I'm going to figure out the running back at some point. Roll the dice on somebody like Breece Hall. Last year, I remember in my league of record, I started off with Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, and I can't even remember the other guy. But it ended up being okay for a while. Obviously, Breece Hall got injured, but like Ramondre ended up carrying me in those kind of situations. So I would rather just go with that and figure out, like, we'll figure out the running back. It's simple. I think somebody like Antonio Gibson could end up being a league winner for a lot of people this season because, Eric Bieniemy comes in as the offensive coordinator. You think about what Jerick McKinnon was able to do, Isaiah Pacheco. They really didn't unlock Antonio Gibson, who by trade was a wide receiver coming out of Memphis. Why is he not your passing down back? Like, what is happening? Fire everybody who thought that it was not a good idea to not get the ball to Antonio Gibson as a receiver out of the backfield. I could not understand that. And so I think that with a receiving core that has Johan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, if Antonio Gibson is part of a triple threat there, the Commanders could throw. I mean, the question is, who's the quarterback? I don't care. Can you throw the ball to Antonio Gibson? I think your most basic entry-level quarterback should be able to make those throws and should be able to get the ball to Antonio Gibson. So give me the wide receivers, and I'll take the Antonio Gibsons of the world a little bit later and just roll the dice and hope for the best.
You set me up well there because I traded Chase Claypool for Gibson when Claypool was on the Steelers, and I was shopping Gibson in this dynasty league of mine I'm talking about until they made the coaching changes, and I was like, okay, he's not available anymore, right?
Nope.
Keeping him. But with Claypool, and I'm thinking about more redraft, but with receivers, like I feel like, for the Bears, everyone's talking about DJ Moore, Mooney. You touched upon Scott earlier, but people forget that Claypool's only about to turn 25. He's 6'4". In his first 2 years with the Steelers, I'm pretty sure he had over 100 targets in both of those years. I feel like guys like him, Michael Thomas, not as much, but I've seen his name floated about because we know he's a PPR beast. We know how great he was in 2018, 2019. And also Traylon Burks, I thought was going to be great for PPR last year as well. But, it's a stuttering Titans offense. But, those three guys or anyone else in terms of redraft, do you think there's any receivers that you would gamble on in the later rounds who you think can turn out to be viable, if you do miss out on those top receivers that we were talking about?
Claypool is really interesting in a best ball format because I think that he's going to be very dependent on touchdowns. I don't know. It all depends on where he lines up. Now, we've got to assume that DJ Moore is going to be the X wide receiver, which means he's on the outside. He's on the line. It depends on who's going to get the reps at slot. If Claypool gets into the slot or if it's Darnell Mooney, I think that gives either one of those guys an advantage. And even Tyler Scott, who was talking about a moment ago, wasn't a slot receiver in college, even though he kind of compares favorably to T.Y. Hilton. He didn't play a lot of slot in college, so he might end up being the flanker on the other side of the football. If Claypool can feast in the slot, I think that that's something that, again, when you're drafting him, it's worth the risk. I think that's a pretty good spot for him. I think that he's one, and again, I come off as very biased, but I think he's got potential because that rookie season, he had 9 touchdowns.
Yeah, I like him.
He was very effective. That was probably the last time that we saw him really use his body. I wish he would use his body a little bit more, but we saw it. We've seen what Luke Getsy and the Packers offense has been able to do with some of those guys that, focus on those guys near the goal line. That's another thing too, though, because Cole Kmet, Bob Tunyon, there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. And then Justin Fields is stealing touchdowns in and of himself. So later round gamble, sure, but don't go in there. I understand the risk. It's like at the craps table. You're betting the 30-1 guy. It's okay. It's the C&E bet, but it's okay. It's still worth it at that point. What do you got to lose?
I'm a 30-1 guy. I think Andrew is as well.
Yeah,
30-1 or higher.
I love the bigger odds. I don't like the safe odds. Get rid of them. Now, one of the most exciting things about fantasy football is when you get someone finishing the Sacco and their bottom, and there's always a punishment. What are some of the best punishments you've seen, and what will your punishment be for your losers of your league? And if it's that good, I might put it forward this year for the loser for our league this year.
Well, my league of record, we do something super lame. Like you got to buy food, which is like, really, this is what we're doing? Like buying food. Like a lot of those guys, a lot of my friends are rich too. Like they're doctors and attorneys. Like you guys have, like, it's not even a detriment to you. You got to do something humiliating. That, you know, a public shaming. I did see this one. So it's funny enough because I think it's this weekend. They have Christmas in June at the Angel games. And so there is one league, and we ran into this guy last year. There is one league that when you are the last place person, you have to dress up as Mrs. Santa Claus and go to the Angels Christmas in June game and take a photo with a sign that says, I suck at fantasy football. I am going to be looking for those guys this weekend. I hope they're out there. We're going to the Saturday night game with the fireworks. So I hope to see that crew once again. I think that's a very good one. In my fantasy baseball league, which I am going to come in last place in, it's a keeper dynasty league that my team sucks. My team's very young. I have a lot of the top prospects, although my Reds prospect just got called up a couple of days ago and he's been killing the Dodgers, which has been amazing. But my team is going to finish in last place. I am going to take the SAT, which is a college prep test that you have to take to get into college. So I'm going to be out there with all these high school kids on a Saturday morning taking the SAT. Not as humiliating as a lot of people will make it out to be, because I'm like, what do I care? But yeah, I'm going to have to go and take this test. They want me to prep for it. I'm like, I'm not prep. I didn't prep for the SAT when I was in high school. I'm not prepping for it now. And I'm going to answer every question. So I'm looking for, and you have to pay for it too. You have to pay. It's like $100. It's expensive. Like, oh man, but I'm going to have to wear that one. But I think that public humiliation, the overnight diner thing where somebody was at a Waffle House, had to sit there for 24 hours and he had to eat what was the thing? Like you have to eat a pancake.
Yeah, he knocked off an hour. Is that right?
Yeah. Something like that. That's always a fun one too. But we really need to find the next great idea. And I haven't really come out to it yet. I think a triathlon would be pretty good. Some sort of like that. I've seen the I've seen somebody, what is it? I don't really like even though I was just talking about the Mrs. Claus thing, I don't really necessarily like the women's clothing thing, but something to do with golf. I think if you had to golf left-handed or whatever it is, something, I don't know. We'll think of the next big idea. A tattoo would always be good.
Ooh.
I think the tattoo is, but I'm of an age of like, I don't have tattoos. I think I'm too old to get started for tattoos. I think once you're over 30, if you don't have a tattoo by the time you're 30, like don't start. Don't start. So maybe 35, but I don't know. If you're somebody who has tattoos, like I've got a group of friends who are like the wrestling guys, and they do a tattoo bet for the Royal Rumble. But it's funny. But it is funny, and it's like you guys have tattoos anyways. It doesn't matter. So you've got Cody Rhodes tattooed on your calf. It doesn't matter. It would stand out on me. Like it would be my only tattoo. Then would I have to start getting other tattoos to make it blend in? There's so much going on there. But depending on what you do, shaving your head, although I'll tell you, sometimes it doesn't always grow back. Just a little word of warning. But we have beards. Andrew, do you have hair? Let me see. What are you working with? Yeah. So I think for us, we could always have to shave our beards.
I couldn't do that.
I can't grow facial hair. I wouldn't look good bald either. Probably look like Gollum out of Lord of the Rings. So
yes, I think if you tailor it towards somebody, where it's like,
yeah,
I can't grow facial hair like you're growing a beard. You have, or if you don't want to cut your hair or cut your beard, like you got to dye it. Got to dye it blue,
bleach blonde,
red.
or,
yes. Do a little Hollywood Hogan stuff to it, like whatever it is. There's always got to be something. Yeah, I think the punishments, the more creative, the better. I think that what we need to start working on more too is determining draft orders. Now, I know a lot of people, what they like to do, if I might give myself a little plug, you can find me on Cameo where you hire me. And by the way, I'm going back to, I had raised my prices for a while. Mostly because I didn't want people to ask me to do anything because I had my daughter's soccer team, the little lady Gunners. We had that going on, some other things, but now that I've got time, I'm like, I'll put a cheap price. If you come to me on Cameo, I'll determine your draft order. Just give me the names of the guys and girls. So give me the names, tell me a little bit about it, and then I will arbitrarily just pick them. However I feel. And if you're the person purchasing the Cameo, you always get the middle of the road. I never give the person the number one pick because I don't think that's fair. If you don't want to do that, I think there are things like playing Mario Kart is always a fun thing. Like Mario Kart's starting to come back into vogue because of the Mario movie.
I saw your tweet as well about buying the kids.
Yeah.
Did you get the Switch sorted?
We're going to do it. Yeah. I think their aunt has a Switch that they're going to loan us. So we're going to see how long they remain interested. And if they're still playing it in December, they'll probably get one for Christmas. But we'll give it a go. Although my kids, especially my boy, like he's been so competitive lately. I don't like it. Like everything's a race. Like they're showering and it's a race. Like everything's a race. And it's like, you guys, please stop. Like not everything's a race. Like who eats their Reese's peanut butter cup? Like, stop it. Like, don't do that. So I'm very concerned about it because I've now tried to do this thing like we were playing memory card games and being very much like, oh, we do the gentleman, like take your cap off and shake the hand after the first game. Oh, well done. Well done, everybody. All right, great game. Let's play again. Like trying to get that to them. So I'm worried about bringing Mario Kart into the world because the amount of fist fights and all the other things that are going to happen.
Yeah, I think the TV show, The League, I don't know, well, most people watch it. They always had great draft order picks and things like that. So, yeah, I think the draft order is definitely something that we definitely need to focus more on how it's picked because we just randomize it. And like you say,
don't do that.
Like the top of the show, it's a good day to get all the guys together and have beers together that you haven't seen for ages, but we never do anything for the actual draft order. So, yeah, it's something we need to look at.
If you don't do the Mario Kart thing, poker tournament, blackjack tournament, anything like that, if not, come back to me. I won't charge you. Since we're friends now.
Brilliant.
We'll do it. I'll just determine it. Although you're picking 5th and 6th. I'm just going to tell you.
I was going to say, if I bought your Cameo, I would have done it from a friend's account.
Spam some of the names of the guys that are in there and just bad talk them and put them in bad places.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, we've only got you for a couple more minutes. So, Skye, have you got any last questions before I leave with my last one?
No questions. The Bears are going to win the NFC North. I'm with you now, Adam.
Yes. Join me here.
Them as my NFC team. Here we go. It's a big breaking news.
I love it. And it's fun to root for Justin Fields. Like that's totally acceptable. Draft him in your fantasy leagues. Then you have a viable reason.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, you have you are justified now. Like I had well, obviously I was talking about Patrick Mahomes. The other guy I had a lot of was Jalen Hurts. So I could be like, well, I got Jalen Hurts in my fantasy, so I'm kind of pulling for him. So draft Justin Fields, and then you got a reason. If not, you can still he's such an exciting player. It's very reminiscent of when Michael Vick was in the league.
Yeah.
Where you just liked him and you're like, oh, I just like Michael Vick. Like there's I'm sure it's like this in Great Britain as well. But like random people who are Falcons fans, like, are you from Atlanta? Like, do you love Darby Swanson and everything? And you're like, no. Like Madden, no further.
Yeah. He was unbeatable.
I got it. Yeah, that all makes sense.
Okay. My last question to you. Obviously, I know you're a big golf fan. Play a lot of golf yourself. So obviously the NFL has had a few little games. Had the Manning versus Brady, Allen versus Mahomes. Who are the 2 NFL players that you'd like to see go head to head on a TV show for golf?
Well, yeah, we've had Mahomes. We sort of got to, we got to get to the next level of this. I would love to see Kirk Cousins do it for whatever reason. I would like to see some sort of mid-off with Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff. Where it's like, you're not great NFL quarterbacks, but you 2 guys can go out there and pair with guys who've won golf tournaments previously and try to get some of the rub there just to see. Like, I think that Kirk Cousins low key is like sort of a funny guy. Like he seems like last year when he was doing the thing with the chain and his shirt off. Like, I think that was kind of fun. Golf is too banal. I don't like that. Who's a fun, you know what? I would like to see who are some of the better personalities? Like Tyreek Hill. I would love to see if Tyreek Hill, like what kind of, like, he's a great athlete. Does it translate to golf? Like, I would love to see, like, cause he's a fast person. I think that he talks enough. Oh, you got to have Jalen Ramsey versus Tyreek Hill. Let's do it. Let's go. I think that just the S talking alone would make that a lot of fun. I think both of those guys putting up the peace sign, Jalen Ramsey talking his talk. I think that's it. I had to workshop that a little bit, but I think I like where I landed right now. Who are your guy? Who would you pick?
I think I'd like to see Kelsey versus Kittle.
Oh, that's good too.
Two
No,
big
that's a
guys.
great one.
I was going to say Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers.
Ooh, not bad.
Jordan Love as the
Yeah,
caddy.
as a caddy.
Do it, yeah. Like have this the three of them, no pros, the three of them.
Well, thank you for joining us, Adam. It's been absolutely fantastic having you on, guys. Go and follow him, Adam Rank NFL, on all social media. Check out the podcast as well, the Sick Podcast. I know you've got a lot of you're putting out a load of your predictions for all the teams at the minute on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. So go check them out, guys. But thank you for joining us. Yeah, hopefully we can get you back on later in the season, see if some of those fancy guys that you told us about work out. But till then, guys, thank you and goodbye.